Hello and welcome to the San Antonio Baptist Association Urban Missionary Training Center. In this video, we'll be looking at access versus no access to the gospel. What does it mean to have access to the gospel, and what does it mean to not have access to the gospel? Obviously, research is an important part of the work of missions. Many times we think that we can do missions without doing the proper research, without the proper preparation. Access in this video means that you can hear about God, the Bible, salvation, and other Christian truths through mass communication. Mass communication means you can turn on the radio and hear the gospel message. You can have a whole radio station dedicated to the gospel message, or you can turn on the television and see television programs of people preaching or singing Christian songs. You can get on the internet and have access to God's Word that way. Or you have other people around you who know the gospel message and can share with you. Or you can read it. You can read a Bible, you can read a tract, you can read some form of communication. Paul tells the Ephesians in chapter 2, remember that you were at that time separate from Christ, excluded from the people of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of the promise, having no hope and without God in the world. That's the way he described the Ephesians before they came to Christ. Let's unpack this, because this shows us a glimpse into what it means to have no access to the gospel. Paul says at that time you were without Christ. That means you didn't know Christ. You had no personal relationship with Jesus Christ himself. You were separated from the commonwealth of Israel. That means you didn't know anybody else who knew Christ. There was nobody in your context who knows about Jesus, who can tell you about Jesus. Then it says, strangers to the covenants of the promise. You did not have access to God's Word. Covenants of the promise refers to what God did among the people of Israel, how God revealed himself little by little until Christ came and was the ultimate expression of who God was and offered salvation to mankind. You didn't even have access to God's Word that could tell you about it. You were without hope and without God in the world. This means that you were lost. You didn't know anybody that could tell you about Jesus. You didn't know Jesus himself. You didn't have God's Word to read. There was no hope for you in that context. There was no hope for you to ever hear the message of salvation. That's what it means to have no access. There are still places in the world today that have no access to the gospel. No access means there's no mass communication. No one knows about Christ. There's no materials to read. There's nothing in print. And even if you can read, you can't get to anything in print. If you can't read, it's even worse if things are in print. No access means there's no local church for you to be able to access, for you to be able to hear the gospel. There's no missionary that is assigned or targeting your people group with the message of salvation. There's no mission agency that is praying about sending a missionary to your people group. No one yet has taken the responsibility to tell you about Jesus Christ. That's what it means to have no access to the gospel. Romans 15 says, "For I will not presume to speak of anything except what Christ has accomplished through me, resulting in the obedience of the Gentiles by word and deed, in the power of signs and wonders, in the power of the Spirit, so that from Jerusalem and all around as far as Illyricum, I have fully preached the gospel of Christ." He goes on to say, "And in this way I aspired to preach the gospel, not where Christ was already known by name, so that I would not build on another person's foundation, but just as it is written, they who have not been told about him will see, and they who have not heard will understand." Paul is talking about going to a place that had no access with with the gospel. He says, I aspire to preach the gospel where Christ was not already known by name. That means a place that has no access. Please contact us if your church or you would like more information about going to a place or helping to access the gospel for other people. We are so privileged in the United States. We can turn on the radio and television. We can even go to Walmart and buy a Bible very cheap. We have God's Word as at access. We need to take advantage of that and make sure that those around us who have little to no access get to hear the message of salvation. If we here in the association can help you in any way, we would be glad to. Thank you for watching this video.